It was a cold, dark morning, and I was awoken by a firm shove from my mother, who was commanding me to get up and get ready to go to the market. I wasn't thrilled about the early start, but I begrudgingly got dressed and accompanied my mother on the 30-minute walk to the market. As we walked down Center Street, we only saw one other person, a friend of my mother's doing some early morning yard work. As we walked further, we noticed a figure in the distance. We assumed it was a parrot that normally frequented that area and continued walking towards it. When we got closer, we realized that it was not a man at all, but a cloaked figure with its back facing a steep drop into a ravine. Its head was tilted down and its hands were crossed, just like in those horror movies. I couldn't make out its face. It was like its face wasn't even there. My mother told me to keep on walking and not to run or look at it. She believed in the local superstition that if you encounter a supernatural being, you should not look at it or touch it and it won't hurt you. But I couldn't help myself. I kept my eyes fixed on the figure, watching as we walked past it. When we were almost out of sight of the figure, I turned back to get one more look at it. But to my horror, the figure was right behind us, following us silently. We quickened our pace, but the figure kept up with us effortlessly. Its breathing was heavy and labored, and I could hear its footsteps echoing loudly in my ears. We turned a corner and I finally caught a glimpse of its face, or lack thereof. The hood was empty, and the figure had no features at all. It was like a walking shadow, or worse, a ghost. I screamed, and my mother tried to calm me down, but we both knew we were in serious trouble. We started to run, but the figure only grew faster, its breathing growing louder and more panicked. It was like it was feeding off of our fear. We finally made it to the market and ran into the crowd of people, hoping to lose the figure in the chaos, but it was still there, stalking us silently. We were trapped, with no way out. The figure was getting closer and closer. Its presence was suffocating us. And then, suddenly, it was gone. The figure vanished into thin air, leaving us shaking and terrified. We told our story to the other vendors at the market, but no one believed us. After that day, we never spoke of the incident again, but I will never forget that morning and the horror that followed us all the way to the Roseau market. It was a humid summer day, and I was about 14 or 15 years old, living in the community of Trafalgar with my two younger brothers and my mother. We would often go to spend time with our father during the weekends and school breaks. This story took place during one of those weekends. The lush and green landscape of Trafalgar hid a mystery that I experienced firsthand, and I remember it like it was yesterday. My cousin came over, and we were all bored, just lounging on my father's bed enjoying the cool air from his fan. Our cousin suggested that we go down to the river in the forest nearby. We had been there many times before, but this time was different. As soon as we left the road and entered into the wilderness, I felt an uneasy feeling. It was strange because I've been here by myself a few times and I've never felt like this. But we continued through the bush without saying a word. After about 5 minutes of walking, something caught my eye. Suddenly, we all turned to look at the same time, our necks in sync. About 20 meters away from us, just behind a thorny bush, was a tall, dark figure. It appeared to be hairless, and its face looked like a living manifestation of a black hole. The bottom half of this thing was partially obscured by a bush, but it appeared to be animal-like a goat or horse. We were frozen in terror for what felt like hours, but it was only seconds before the creature ran away. It didn't run away galloping like a horse or how a hoofed creature should. It ran away at a super high speed, disappearing right before our eyes. The fear I felt was indescribable, but what made it even scarier was the fact that we saw this thing during the middle of the day. It wasn't even close to sunset. It was 2 p.m. for the latest. The sound of our pounding hearts filled the air as we sprinted back to the main road and ran all the way back home. We never visited that river or patch of forest ever again. To this day, I can't fully process what I saw through the bush. But one thing is for sure. I know I saw something that day. Something that should not exist in our world. The sound of the Jeep engine roared in the night as the group of friends drove down the dark and deserted highway towards Portsmouth. The air was crisp and chilly, sending shivers down their spines as they laughed and chatted, oblivious to the horrors that awaited them. As they passed the Maho area and approached the Jimmy Highway, they noticed something strange across the street from the bus stop. A frail and elderly woman dressed in a floral skirt and a turquoise t-shirt stood alone, with her hand outstretched, beckoning for a ride. But the group of friends were wary, and they drove past her, dismissing her as senile and forgetting about her. Hours later, as they drove back towards town, the silence was broken only by the steady hum of the engine and the soft snoring of their drunk friends in the backseat. The driver's eyes drooped with exhaustion, and the road ahead seemed endless. But suddenly, the silence was shattered by a loud gasp from the passenger seat. The driver's eyes widened in terror as he too saw the same old lady from earlier, standing under the bus stop, on the left side of the road this time, still trying to hitch a ride. As they drove closer, they saw that her eyes were dark and empty, and that her face was twisted into a grotesque smile. Her outstretched hand was gnarled and bony, like that of a corpse, and as they passed her, the group could hear the sound of her cackling laughter echoing in the darkness. The driver stepped on the gas, desperate to get away from the horrifying sight, but the laughter followed them, growing louder and more menacing with each passing second. The group of friends were paralyzed with fear, unable to escape the relentless sound of the old lady's maniacal cackling. Finally, they reached the safety of their homes, but the memory of the old lady and her terrifying laughter lingered on, and to this day, they never drove down the Jimmy Highway late at night again, for the fear of encountering the hitchhiking old lady and her haunting laughter.